Welcome. This is our second panel with our fabulous Kappa Theta Epsilon KTE students sharing their stories and experiences of working in industry while still in college as part of Girl Day at UT Austin 2021, our virtual experience for high school students. So thanks for joining in today. We're glad to have you. And with that, I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to all of you.
Awesome. Let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So hi everybody, welcome to Girl Day. We're KTE or Kappa Theta Epsilon. We're the Co-op Engineering Honor Society here at UT. If you don't know what a co-op is, it's like a very long internship. Most internships you'll do in college or over the summer, but co-ops are usually during the spring or fall semester. And for co-ops, when you do them with different companies and organizations, you normally do it for multiple tours. So I've done 4 semesters, so that means I've done 2 fall and spring semesters and 2 summer semesters. So when people say they've done co-ops, they have a lot of industry experience in whatever company or organization they work for. So that's what we're here today. We're here to give you college and professional career advice while you're still in college. So our KT mission is to foster community for returning co-op students and promote doing co-ops through UT and serving our community. So plans for today, we're going to introduce our panelists, where we worked, and some of the interesting projects we've done. And then it'll be your turn to ask questions to the panelists. We can tell them some fun, cool stories about the projects we've done, and hopefully you'll get very good college and professional career advice out of this panel talk. So I can go first. So hi everybody, I'm Sharaya. So I worked at NASA Johnson Space Center. So I'm mostly a software engineer, but I've worked in structures, navigations, and guidance. So I've worked 4 tours or 4 semesters. So I have over 2 years of experience working in NASA. It's a very wonderful and fulfilling environment. A lot of wonderful people to work with. A couple of pictures you see here on the left. We have an intern rocketry club where we made a rocket from scratch and actually launched it with avionics and structures and propulsion. And we also landed it with a parachute. So that was really fun. The middle picture is me at the Natural Buoyancy Lab. If you ever have a chance to take a tour at NASA, it's a huge pool, much bigger than any Olympic pool you'll ever see or school pool you'll ever see. It's actually a giant deep pool with a really big spaceship inside. And this is where all the astronauts do their training, because like the water acts like 0G to them. So all the astronauts do, honestly, years and months of training at the Natural Buoyancy Lab. So we had a movie night there, so that was really fun. And the couple pictures of us with the rocket and with my team that I worked with. Next up, Morgan.
All right, and hi everyone, my name is Morgan Bordelon. I'm in my last year of college in chemical engineering. And so I've done a total of 3 co-op terms with the Dow Chemical Company. One of those was in production at a site up in Philadelphia. The second one was as an environmental engineer at a site outside of New Orleans, Louisiana. And my third and final term, I went back to the New Orleans site and was an improvement engineer. And so you can see those 2 pictures on the left. That's from the site in New Orleans where I did those 2 terms. And then on the right is not a picture for my co-ops, but I did end up doing an internship with Nike this past summer. And I was a process engineer for their shoes that contain air. So Vapor Max, Air Max, all those shoes we do polyurethane processing. And yeah.
Sweet. Hello, everyone. My name is Caden Capello. I'm currently a junior chemical engineering student here at the University of Texas at Austin. I've completed 2 different co-op terms, each of which were 5 months long. And the first was with LyondellBasell. So they're a company in the chemicals and plastics industry. And during that term, I was a utilities intern. So I looked into cooling water systems and flare designs, which are both very important systems to make sure that you're operating a chemical plant safely and reliably. And then the second term I did with ExxonMobil, working at their chemical company plant in Baytown, Texas. And so that's the picture you see on the left. And the funny thing is that it was actually during COVID. And so it was cool to get industry experience during the COVID time frame. And I worked on the butyl polymers and the polypropylene teams. And so butyl polymers are used within your tires, and they help help retain air within your tires. And then for polypropylene, a lot of the grades that we produce go into medical PPE and different types of medical equipment that was used heavily during the COVID timeframe. The middle picture is of, you can see a large column, so that's called a distillation column. And one of my projects when I was working for LyondellBasell was to calculate the liquid level in each of the distillation columns within the plant. So that was a cool experience, getting to utilize different understandings of math and physics and how pressure works within columns. And then on the right, during the co-op, one of the things you get to do is simply get to meet people of different backgrounds from different universities. So here's a picture of some of the friends that I made from different universities around the nation. So thank you all.
Awesome, thanks so much. So I'll stop sharing now, and everybody can have the chance to ask questions. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand, unmute yourself, or put in the chat, whatever works with you. If not, we can tell some maybe fun stories about our co-op terms. Any wacky adventures we've had. Okay, so here's one thing. What's the most challenging thing you worked on in your job? I can go first for that. So probably the most challenging thing is I worked on the Orion spacecraft, which is like the next generation spacecraft going to the moon and Mars. And it's with a really gigantic team over, I think, 300, 400 people, not just in NASA, but in Lockheed and SpaceX also. So working on those very big projects, you know, it can be monumental, and you can have like a little identity crisis. You drink such a little thing. So getting to like wrap your head around such a massive project and actually giving to it, can be very challenging. But if you're patient and keep working hard enough, I think you can do it. Anything for me too?
Yeah, so the main thing I thought of was, so my internship with Nike actually did end up going virtual because it was this past summer. And Nike's processes are very niche. Basically, nobody else in the world has the same processes in them. So having to do that from a virtual standpoint was really difficult. And it did take a lot of talking to my mentors and asking them to kind of do a video call and show me the floor. And also just talking to other coworkers to try and figure out exactly, you know, what I was working with and how to fix the problems they gave me.
Yeah, one of the most challenging projects I worked on was in chemical engineering. You can do a lot of reactor design and reactor operation, and at the time I hadn't taken that class yet, and so I had to do a lot of learning of the different phases that reactors go through, understanding steady state operations, and then also how to operate them in a safe and reliable manner so that you don't have any personal or process safety concerns. And then on top of that, it was also virtual during COVID. So like Morgan said, I had to leverage my team members and my mentors to make sure that I was getting the best understanding and knowledge of how reactor operations occur.
Next question. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome at your job? Was it scary to go into your job and didn't know how to do? Yeah, so if nobody knows what imposter syndrome is, like you feel like you don't belong there, and 100% definitely have experienced that at NASA. Some of the people I worked with probably like top of their fields, best in the world. So you can feel very little being around them, but you'll see that when you go into an internship or co-op or even full-time, nobody ever expects you to know anything. So they don't expect you to know everything. So they do let you in, and there's a huge learning curve, but they know that. So don't be, like backed off because like you don't know everything that they know. They've had decades of experience. So if you're just patient and you go through it, eventually you'll be like them too. So I've definitely experienced imposter syndrome, and the way to cure it is probably just time and patience.
Yeah, I remember my first term was definitely pretty terrifying going in, but every experience that you have after that, it just gets easier and easier every time because you know how to talk to people the right way, to ask them questions. You're not so afraid to reach out, and it just takes time.
Yeah, like Morgan said, the biggest thing for me was learning how to ask questions and learning to actually ask questions. That was the biggest thing that I had to do once I started experiencing imposter syndrome, because it is very real. And you're like, wow, I don't know anything. But, these internships are designed to help develop you, to help you learn how to learn better and how to become a better engineer and how to ask better questions. And so that's the whole like learning process and learning curve of these internships.
So next question, what's the best part of being an engineering student? That's a great question. I would say working on a very interesting and impactful projects. Like I work on spaceships, so it's a really fun thing to say during a conversation. And I think it's just a very impactful thing of any engineering project you do. You're like inspiring kids to follow their dreams, go into engineering projects. And being an engineer, like I think like, everything you can do pretty much. Like if you want to make something, you have the tools, you have the opportunities, you have the resources to make what you want. So I think that's probably the best part of being an engineering student.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I was thinking, I just like the way it kind of makes you think about things. It makes you be very practical, and then you're very curious about how things work, and to the point where you'll look it up just because you have no idea. And yeah, it makes you curious about very simple things like how do I fix my dishwasher or anything like that.
Yeah, YouTube's a great tool these days. You can pretty much learn everything there. So highly recommend you take the chance to look at all this. Another question, can you describe a project you worked on as a co-op student? Did you calculate things? Did you simulate things, work with others? Get specific. Okay, so for me, yeah, so I've done a couple projects. I've done 4 terms. So I've done stuff in software, I've done stuff in guidance, I've done stuff in structures. So the main thing I would say working on all those projects is working with others and teamwork, how important it is. If you don't have good teamwork, you don't have good synergy on your team, nothing's going to get done right. Because like I said, as an intern, there's a huge learning curve. So if you can't be able to talk to people and ask them questions, you're never going to get as many things as you want done. So probably the main thing I would say for the projects I've done is teamwork. Anybody want to say something? After that, we can maybe describe some of the projects we've done too.
Right. One of the biggest projects I did was I was in environmental engineering. And basically we had to put together a spreadsheet that made it really easier for the auditor that came in to basically check to make sure that we're doing everything the way we're supposed to. So I had to basically go out into the field and find out a bunch of different information about somewhere around 200 different pumps and just what liquids that they're carrying in them, what types of seals do we have on them, what types of alarms. And no, that didn't require me to calculate anything, but it did require me to talk a lot to operators, because you'll figure out when you're going through a lot of information, these plants are very old, there's a ton of stuff that's missing or mislabeled, and you'll find mistakes along the way. And I don't have much experience with these pumps. These TAs have been working with them for years. They can spot the mistakes and definitely help you out. But yeah, it did require a lot of work with people. Sometimes you just can't find the pump because there are so many pumps out there. You have to ask them to lead you to it. But that was a good one. It just showed me a lot about basically how much information that the state requires to make sure that you're operating as safely as possible.
Yeah, one of the projects that I worked on when I was a utilities engineer was looking into the cooling water system throughout the plant. So cooling water is used to make sure that it's used to remove heat from different process conditions and different pieces of equipment. So if you have a pump, you don't want it to get too hot, because then you'll have material within it that melts or it'll overheat. And so you use the cooling water to absorb heat from different systems. And so this is a cool learning experience for me, because cooling water is used throughout the entire plant. And I was able to use what are called process and information diagrams to get an idea of where cooling water goes throughout the entire plant. And then, like Morgan said, I worked with operators and went out into the field to get an idea of these hundreds of feet of runs of piping and where all the water goes to. And then using that information that I gathered in the field, I then created a hydraulic flow simulation to look into how the fluid flow works and the pressure drop across the different portions of the system. So those are some of the calculations that I got to do. And then like the result of the project was that with my simulation, the plant was able to understand how their cooling water system was working. And then in the future, if they ever had any shutdowns or inefficiencies, they could use my flow model to figure out and pinpoint where exactly the issue was coming from.
Okay, awesome. So here's another question. How did you decide your major? That's a good question. So I've always liked space, even when I was a kid. You can see on my 5th grade yearbook, it said space engineers and occupation. So that's always what I wanted to do. But one advice I will give is don't boggle yourself down with a major. If you have a passion, you will find a space to fulfill that passion. So I know a lot of aerospace engineers who go into medicine for like astronaut training or even like suit development. So I know even if you're an aerospace engineer, you can go into all these other fields. So I would say always follow your passion, and then a major will come second, and you'll always find a space where you can fulfill your opportunities and passions.
Right, and definitely with the major, great thing about engineering is that we end up all over the place. You know, you can stay in the technical role, you can go into consulting, you can go eventually get your MBA and be in the business side of everything. So that's definitely a big factor in it. It just gives you great problem solving skills that can be applied really anywhere. I just really loved math. My dad and my grandpa were also engineers, so that definitely played a role. They wanted another engineer in the family. But yes, I chose chemistry or chemical engineering because I also really love chemistry, and just being able to be in an environment where I get to work with my hands and not just sit at a desk all day.
Yeah, I think when you're looking into your major, you also want to figure out like what are some of your goals, what are your motivations in life. For me, one of my motivations in life is having job stability and job versatility. So like Morgan said, as a chemical engineer, you can go into a lot of different fields, a lot of different industries. You know, she mentioned the business side. You can work at a chemical plant, you can work for an oil and gas company, or you can go into pharmaceuticals. And those are just like a few of the many different branches. So that's really what drove me to become a chemical engineer, is the vast amount of opportunities, and then just the need for chemical engineers in society. Yeah.
Okay, great. So next question is, what made you decide on UT Austin as a college? Did you consider other schools, and how did you make the decision? So yeah, UT Austin's honestly a top 10 engineering school. It's a fantastic school to go for engineering. So, and it was close by to me. I live in Houston, so it's in Austin. So it's the closest to my family is also a factor in it. But one thing about UT, I will also say it's a great networking school. And if you didn't know, we pump out the most research papers pretty much out of any other university. So if you want research opportunities, it's very readily available also there. And one thing about UT is it's expos. So we have an engineering expo every semester, and it's a great way to meet recruiters from other companies. And it's probably the best way to get jobs, I would say. And that's one thing you can't get if you like. You can learn all the information reading books and watching lectures and slides online, but actually going to a university like UT, you can really network and find those opportunities to get the jobs you want. So that's probably the main reason I wanted to go to UT.
Right, and I decided to go to UT primarily because of two reasons. The rankings were really great, and also Austin is a great place to stay. I did consider some other schools, but like I said, basically Austin was going to set me up for the basically the best future I can imagine in chemical engineering, just because so many companies really come to us for engineers, especially in chemicals and in petroleum.
Yeah, for me and my family, financials was a role that played into it, as well as to why I chose UT Austin. So I'm originally from Houston, so in-state tuition was a driving factor, which is a great benefit versus if I was to go to an engineering school somewhere else in the country. But also, like Morgan and Sharaya mentioned, I believe like in the past however many years, UT's chemical engineering has been in the single digits of top engineering programs. So that's a huge incentive. And then, you know, there's a lot of networking opportunities, but also it's just a school of tradition. It's been around since the late 1800s, and it's a school that when people think of Texas, they think of the University of Texas Longhorn. So that's why I chose UT.
Okay, next question. Was there anything surprising about the company you co-op and learned with, or something you never considered? I would say probably one of the most surprising things for me are how many meetings I actually had during my co-op. If you look at my Outlook calendar, it was just filled with meetings, much more meetings than I thought I would have. So that's one thing I never considered, but it makes sense if you're working on such big projects like these. You have to have logistic meetings and have people review your findings, your research, your engineering, your code, and making sure everything's up to shape. So having meetings is very important. It's probably one thing I never considered.
Right. And something I definitely noticed working with different areas. So I worked in Philadelphia, I worked in New Orleans, and then I worked with Nike, which is based out of Portland. The culture really varies site to site. So even if you may not fit at one location in the company, there are definitely opportunities to move, figure out where you want to be. That was different because working in the North, especially with the union, workers union, was very different than when I went down south and the union didn't exist. So that was definitely a big shock that just the way that they operate was very different, just depending on what area of the country that it's located in.
Yeah, I think the thing that was surprising for me was just the huge amount of diversity within the companies, in terms of gender, sexuality, races, ethnicity. These companies are really making pushes and strides to be inclusive, but also be welcoming and to all people of different kinds and different situations. So I think that was something that was very surprising to me. When you're in engineering, sometimes you hear the stereotype of, oh, it's all men or it's all women or whatever. But, I didn't experience any of that. I was working with people who had been working in the chemical plants for 40 years, and they didn't have a college degree versus some people had masters and doctorates. So you work with a huge variety of people, and you get to learn different experiences and how to communicate with different people who have different backgrounds than yourself.
Next question, piggyback off the last question. What was the most surprising thing about your engineering work, and anything you learned that gave you a different perspective on the job? I would say probably the most surprising thing about my work is how impactful it can be. It's like I think it's kind of hard to quantify when you're doing like projects like these, inspiring other people, and like what kind of impact it can have on their lives, and they want to pursue their dreams. So that's probably the most surprising thing for me. It's really humbled me to know that I've hopefully impacted a lot of people to for them to follow their dreams too.
All right. And something that I learned throughout them is that, there's not a single answer to every problem that you're going to get. You can do it a bunch of different ways. They can all be right. And then kind of along with that is that sometimes, you're only in your co-op for 3 to 4 months, sometimes, or up to 6 to 8 months, but you just might not be able to solve that problem in that amount of time. And sometimes you just got to let it go, which is kind of tough to not be able to figure out, or be able to solve that problem before you leave. But because of just the time crunch, sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, the thing that surprised me the most was that as an intern, you will get projects that they would give to a full-time engineer. So they treat you as a full-time engineer. And with that comes a lot of responsibility, but there's also high rewards. There's a lot of learning opportunities. And then with these co-op internships and typically engineering internships in general, you give like a final presentation at the end. So you get to sit in front of the directors and your mentors and your bosses and say, hey, these are some of the projects that I worked on. And it's really rewarding to be able to verbalize yourself like, hey, I worked on these projects with the help of these people. And here is the reward that the plant will see or that the company will see as a result of these projects.
Yeah, awesome. Great advice. So we're going to start wrapping things up because it's almost 1:30. But before that, we can maybe give some suggestions or tips about how you can, for considering applying to engineering. One thing I will do is give a huge shout out to SWE, which is Society of Women in Engineering. They have great high school resources for anybody who wants to go into the engineering field, and the networking opportunities in SWE are really fantastic too. Maybe Morgan can speak a little more to that.
Right, yeah, I've been involved with SWE basically ever since I started college. It's really where I've met most of my friends. You don't see this amount of women in all your classes, and so it's nice to be able to meet up, get together. They do a lot of fun socials like going kayaking and stuff around Halloween and the holidays, and we make finals care packages for all the girls, and it's a good way to make another smaller community within the entire Cockrell school.
Yeah, and then one other thing I will plug in is that UT has very good research opportunities for high school students too. When I was researching, we always used to take in high school students or even middle school students sometimes for the summer for research opportunities. So if your summer's free and you're willing to go to UT or you're by Austin, I would highly recommend you do stuff like that. It'll look great on your college resume when you're applying to any university, not just UT. So that's another helpful tip I would give. And probably lastly, maybe suggestions for any if you're going to college and looking back on my first year and all our first years, any advice we would give. One advice I would give is take opportunity of like the networking experiences and everything you have in there. In at least UT in first year, we have FIGs, which are freshman interest groups, I think they're called. So in those groups, you have like it's smaller than a class, maybe like 10 or 20 people, and you just get to chat with an older mentor, maybe a sophomore or junior, and you can ask some questions, not just about engineering, but college in general. It's hard to get on your feet the first year because you're trying to handle your classes, but you're also trying to handle cooking for yourself and maybe living for yourself for the first time. So having opportunities and resources like those are very important to get yourself standing in college.
All right. And another tip for choosing the major, I think a big one to just mention is that, you don't have to stay in the same major that you come in. Caden switched his major, I believe, and a lot of people are afraid to do that once they start, but that's definitely, you shouldn't stay in a major that you don't feel comfortable in or you don't see yourself with the future surrounding that kind of work. So don't be afraid to explore other majors, look at your options, and if you find later that engineering is meant for you, you can always switch into that. Or maybe if you find that engineering isn't meant for you, don't be afraid to switch out.
Yeah, like Morgan said, there's a lot of overlap with your early careers and the curriculums and the classes that you take. So if you start out in something like civil engineering, but you decide you want to transfer to biomedical engineering, there's a high probability that the class you took your freshman year will also count for your new major. So like Morgan said, don't be afraid to switch majors. Delaying your graduation by maybe a semester won't be that big of a deal. And UT has a very good internal transfer system. And so, find the opportunities that you want to pursue. And my recommendation would be ask as many questions as possible once you get on campus to see if you see like that major in that career as something that you see yourself fitting into.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're ever wondering about, oh, maybe I want to go into this job opportunity, so I'm going to switch major, the best thing I would say is to talk to your advisor about it and hear what they have to say, and maybe they can give you a steer in the right direction is always probably the best way to go for it. So we're going to wrap things up. I just want to remind everybody that there'll be more live programs tomorrow for Girl Day, and there'll be even more live programs next week. So 100% check out the Girl Day website for all the information, all the registration for it. It's been fantastic talking to all of you. I hope you got some nice professional and career advice for when you do go into college or if you're in college. And yeah, it's been great talking to you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.